Hello, everyone, whoever's listening, and maybe also watching. Or perhaps we will have a video recording available as well, if Alan can figure that out. We are here. We had some technical difficulties before because the website that Alan is using is down for these recordings. So we're trying out some other software. Um, yeah, so here we are here with Niko Matsakis, the famous celebrity of the Rust world. We're glad to have him. I just wanted to touch base with Niko here because it's the topic here is AI, right? Like AI is now everywhere, and there's different camps. Like some people hate it, some people love it, and there's a lot of there are a lot of people like us who are maybe in the middle somewhere. Yeah, so just wanted to have a discussion. Niko being involved so much in the core of Rust and all the decisions that are happening there, and me as a just as a community member and you as a user of Rust here, and Alan as well. He's also a Rust user. So um, would be good to have a discussion here about that. So yeah, I don't think I need to introduce myself. I have been on this podcast many times, and Alan is the usual host. Yeah, I don't know if we need to introduce Alan either. But Niko, if you want to start off with some sort of intro of yourself and this topic, that would be cool.
Sure. Yeah, so I've been working on Rust since 2011. I usually say I'm the longest surviving contributor. I didn't, obviously Graydon kicked off the project, and when I joined, there were a bunch of work already in progress, but at the same time, I've done a lot of things over the years, including, the original and continued design of the borrow checker and so forth. The Uh, but at the moment, I'm working at Amazon where I'm a senior principal engineer, which I think is relevant to this topic because um, even though I mostly just do external work, I also have an interesting view on how development is happening, inside Amazon, and I think it's similar in many big companies. Uh, and there are some definite trends that we can speak about around AI. Uh, the I guess my general perspective, I think like you mentioned, Zishan, I sort of fall in between. I consider myself, I guess it comes down to this. I have a lot of frustration with AI-based development. I see a lot of limitations, and I think it's the future. And uh, I want to get ahead of it, and I want to do our part in making it awesome, like improving the problems. I don't think most of the problems that I see um, they seem to me like, or at least let's put it this way. Yeah, a lot of those problems I think, can be solved and will be solved, right? And I'd like to get, um, I don't know, I'd like to be involved in that, be at the front of that effort.
Cool. Well, what have you been actually doing with AI? Like, how have you been using the tools, and which tools do you use?
Mm. Uh, I I don't remember how long I've been playing with it, but I do remember my first experience, which is so I've been working as a side project on this programming language Dada, which is like a experimental refinement of Rust and takes a different approach in some ways. And I've blogged about it a little bit. It's really fun. Unfortunately, I haven't done much of it in the last little while, but at some point I remember I was working on it and I wanted a VS Code uh, extension, and I pulled up Klein, which is a VS Code plugin, agentic plugin, an early one. And I basically said, make me a VS Code extension, and which I think is exactly the wrong way to use AI now, but that's what I did. And it worked. It did a great job, actually. I remember being particularly impressed because it went and found my test files and deduced what the grammar probably must be, and then made a little parser to do the syntax highlighting. And I was like, at that point, I was like, oh my God, like this is going to change a lot of
This is
things.
Claude?
That was well, that was Klein. I don't remember what model it was using, probably Claude.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, now so I've been watching it evolve since then, right? Like early on, I was I did these experiments. I've been doing, I have this project called Symposium, which we can talk about more later, but it's kind of evolved over the years as the models have evolved in its focus. Early on, I was building like GUI tooling and things and prompts to try to convince the models to be a little less hyperactive. They still have this tendency, but it's much better now. But it used to be like you just kind of hinted them that there's something you might like, and then they would run off and start doing it before
Mhm.
you even had a chance to kind of give them a sense of what you actually want. Be like, I think this code could be better. Okay, great. Let me go fix it. And I'm like, well, you know. Anyway, so I spent a lot of time on that, but now I feel like those problems are changing, which kind of gets at the problem. Like this stuff is advancing really fast, and it's hard to figure out,
Yeah.
where to get in and how you can kind of ride that. Anyway, my current workflow, lately I've been using Zed a lot. I really like the way they've integrated their workspaces support and multi-project support, and it's just a great editor. I'm also keen on the possibilities of the agent client protocol, which they have pioneered and have support for, um, which I think could be a key part to kind of changing the way that AI development works now, which I find to be overly vertical, and integrated. And then I'm still tinkering with, the right way to structure my projects, but I spend a lot of time writing docs together with the model usually, and then saying, okay, execute. And, I found that's definitely a much better approach. I think some people call it spec-driven development. Some people call it a bunch of different things. I don't know. They're all
Right.
variations of markdown-driven development from what I can see. But
So basically, what you do is like just like I do, you do this spec creation with the model together with it, and
yeah,
then let it just write the code for you, and you don't write the code itself.
yes, asterisks. What I found is that by itself doesn't usually get me what I want for the project. It depends on the project, is the
Right.
real answer. Like recently I was writing something to crunch some data, right? And for this, yeah, I never looked at the code. I didn't have to. I didn't even make a spec actually. I just kind of vibe coded it. And that works fine. But if you take that approach for more complex applications, I found it doesn't usually get me the architecture I want. So what I often do is go back in, hand edit the code for a while until it's more in line. And that tends to be much more interactive, where I'm like, I'm doing this, and then I hit something, a refactoring that's going to be kind of tedious, and I'll go to the agent and say, okay, I'm in the middle of doing stuff, but so don't go crazy. Your tests aren't going to pass, but can you just like change this to that and stuff like that? Um, and if once the shape is kind of more how I imagine it, then the agent tends to work better within that contour. But I do find they're not very good at getting the shape.
Right.
Or maybe I haven't learned the way to do it. It's always it's a little bit
So
of a question mark. But
do you
um,
find yourself like often like getting in the code yourself, like saying, "Oh, yeah, model can't do it. I'll just do it myself," or is it like mostly you nudge the model in the right direction and you keep nudging it until it gets it right?
I think it starts with, I think it depends, but I think it starts with a lot of hand editing and then becomes much less over time. It used to be much more like I remember really fighting with the models to get some what I considered fairly obvious algorithms. And I remember spending a long time and eventually being like, why am I doing this? I could write this code in like 45 seconds.
Yeah.
I just spent like an hour trying to convince the model to write the code. That was kind of dumb. But well, I haven't had that kind of issue lately. Now I'm usually for like a tactical thing, like the body of a function, I can usually just say, here's how I want it to work. You should use a depth first search, blah, 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 and it'll do an okay job. But it's more like what modules are there, what's public, what's not, what's the interface around that module that the model doesn't, I think, have a good sense for that. It tends to be very focused on what it's looking at right now and never zooms out.
Right. Cool. I will sort of put you on the spot and ask you if any of the code in Rust right now is AI generated that you
I
wrote.
mean, not so the Rust compiler, well, first of all, the answer to that question is yes, but not by me, at least in the Rust compiler, because I don't haven't contributed any code directly to the Rust compiler in quite some time. Um, the there is a lot of ongoing discussion about the policy around AI contribution, and we can
Yeah,
talk about it. I've kind of checked out from that, to be totally blunt. I'm not fully aligned, but also not fully unaligned with the
right.
direction that folks are going, and you know, I
Yeah,
I trust the. It's a complicated topic.
yeah.
Uh,
I have a question later on about that one,
yeah,
but
okay.
for now, I was just wondering if like there's
So
um,
that certainly there has been past contribution that uses an LLM, some of which we know of, some of which we don't, right?
right,
And
right.
I have used LLMs on other things in the Rust org,
Mhm.
and I'm always very open about that, so it's not a secret. Like I've been working on mere formality, which is a kind of model of Rust, and I've used LLMs to bootstrap some of that work. But it's an interesting example actually because it's a project that aims to be a very high level. So actually the goal is to be fluidly editable by hand, and I think it is like um so in some sense you don't need like the LLM as much, and I think that's great. But also it's still helpful for chores and tasks and
Right.
restructurings that are quite tedious otherwise.
And do you think like I think at least
Well,
I often sorry.
I I actually want to add one more thing. The,
Okay,
the
sure.
the the thing that I've used LLMs the most for in formality and gotten the most benefit from isn't the code though. It's
Right,
it's actually trying to do the tedious tasks of an open source of running an open source project. Like when we were participating in Outreachy, we needed to have a
right,
whole bunch of starter issues opened to get people initial tasks to do. And it was like weeks and we weren't doing it. And so I sat down with an LLM and I like said, here's like the three high level areas I think would make for good starter issues. Like we want to create for every piece of every expression in Rust, we want to test stuff like that, right? But we have tests for like 10%. So go look, find what tests we have. Like first catalog the set we need, catalog what tests we have, then using this template of how an issue should look, go and open issues for all the ones we don't have, right? And I was able to, in about an hour, like lay out a good set of starter issues. And I've been working on the next round of that now. And that's where I think people are sometimes they get really focused on the code. And that is an
hmm
interesting topic. And I, kind of opine about it for hours. But like, I actually think we're overlooking the potential for uh, really opening up to a lot more contribution and making contribution much more accessible. Oh, more around like workflows, right? The tedious stuff that actually just often doesn't get done at all.
right. Interesting. Because I was about to ask about more about the code stuff, like because one of the things that I say it often because I feel it, and a lot of Rust folks have said the same thing. But I don't know what you think about it, but I think Rust itself is especially is a very good uh, friend of of LLM based development, right? Like I don't know what is your what are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it is if you've if you've been doing Rust a long time, you're familiar with the idea that like you you've got this learning curve, the so-called fighting the borrow checker or whatever. You kind of pass through it in somewhere between 6 weeks and 3 months, and most people, at least based on the data I've seen, some folks takes longer, some less, and then you move faster, right? And that's the part that I think people you don't often. It's not intuitive that it would be true. You'd think, oh, I get through it, and then I'm like I know a lot of teams at Amazon told me they expected to move slower because they were like, well, I'm in the beginning, I'm really struggling to get anything to build at all. They kind of expected that to be a constant overhead on their velocity, but they found the opposite was true, that once they were working with the compiler, they were moving faster. And so it seems
Right.
to me like LLMs basically skip that, reinforcement learning already did that first part for you. Now you can just benefit from the second half where you have these guardrails, they're detecting your bugs, they're helping you, find things, shifting your problems left. And by the time you get to production, your code is working more reliably. I've definitely found that to be true. I mean, I don't claim to have done like, actually, I'm trying to figure out how to do more quantitative analyses of these kinds of problems. But at the moment, it's sort of an intuitive sense. But
Right.
yeah, I've been a little surprised. I mean, because I think my hypothesis is, and I think it's borne out, that as you're using LLM tools, you get less engaged with the code or the language, right? I kind of think the choice of programming language is going to become uh, like ARM versus x86. Like, yeah, you care. It affects your results, but it's not the high order bid, and you kind of try to work with both. And, it's a little bit of a bittersweet thing for me, right? Seeing all these projects moving between languages and stuff like that, because hey, it's cool. A lot of people are adopting Rust, and there's a much lower barrier, and they, in some ways, it doesn't matter as much what language they choose anymore because it's not the primary interface for a lot of people. Um,
Right. Do I understand you correctly that is it, I guess you're saying both things are true, that the barrier to become proficient at Rust has it's gone lower, and at the same time, the people who are already past that barrier, who are already fluent, they get a more like boost from Rust at the same time, because they can, from LLM, because they can just rely
yes.
on them.
Yeah, I'm saying LLMs do, I think, work better with guardrails, and Rust
Mhm.
has a lot of guardrails. I
Right.
think, if you're using TypeScript or if you configure your Python to use types, like you get some benefit from that as well. Uh, but I think Rust has a more sophisticated approach and tends to benefit very well,
Mhm.
especially if you're knowledgeable about Rust, where I think what that, in my mind, the sort of the best practice is like modeling your domain using the tools that Rust gives you, right? So like
Mhm.
using traits, using enums to kind of make invalid states unrepresentable and just rule out things. The more you can do that, the more that the LLM benefits, right? And just like a human does, both of you do.
Right.
So that's all true. I'm also saying, um, like that I think the question of programming languages is much more a practical one and less of a taste and sort of tribal affiliation, which is often what it used to be. It's much less about what you know now and much more about what do you need out of this system. Uh,
Right.
and Rust has a pretty good, I mean, I think there's a broad set of use cases where Rust is a solid choice. There are some where it's not, but
Yeah. I think it's also about popularity, right? Like the first AI tool that I ever really used in development was the Copilot, the GitHub Copilot when they announced it. And
hmm
at first, when they were actually demonstrating it, they've got some bunch of people and they're showing a video of them trying it out. And they tried it on different languages, and none of them were Rust developers. So they use it on multiple different languages, Go and Python and everything, and it worked really well. Like it was doing the completions for them and stuff. It was like glorified. It was autocomplete, right? But much smarter. And but then when they tried Rust, none of them knew Rust. So when they tried it, it didn't work because they didn't know that you need a cargo toml as well, not just the code. And Copilot couldn't tell them. So
yeah,
it's quite a bit of
that's definitely better now.
yeah.
Actually, my favorite story from those early days, I started playing with some of those tools, and I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with Eddie B, legendary Rust C hacker. Now think I forget which the name of the company is, but he's the one doing this Rust on the GPU stuff. And but he left. He was sort of famous for comments in the code base, and when I remember typing slash slash and the auto completion from I think this was Code Whisperer, which was like Amazon's version of Copilot. But I typed slash slash and it said, "Fix me," parenthesis, Eddie B, parenthesis. And that's like what it had learned comes after a comment. And I thought that was fantastic. Anyway, I found a bug on it, but
Um,
yeah, I mean it's much better now. And a lot of people have told me, I frequently have people coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I'm building stuff in Rust." I mean, I don't know Rust, but I'm building stuff in Rust. Uh, you know, and that just seems to be the way it is now.
yeah, I've coded a few things completely, almost completely, and sort of worked like all the essential work. And it's getting better. Like I think there were like only two apps that I completely web coded. And one I did like a year ago or 2 years ago. That was not that good. And now that I did it, it was really good. I'll talk about it later. But talking of Rust and LLM, one other thing I think we talked about it a bit, is like the tooling. So um, even if you have LLM, you need something to deal with, let's say Rust Analyzer, right? Like you want some way of better integration with Rust in general, like cargo and all of that. So do you have any of those toolings, or also like when you type a prompt, right? Like you want to be specific about some specific, for example, in my I have like a Claude MD in my home directory, like a global setting. And in there, I have put a lot of like settings about how to deal with macros and stuff like that. Especially with macros, I found it interesting that it was always like when it was putting these conditionals like for features. So it was putting the features in the generated code, like in the proc macro, like not is it proc macro? I always use the wrong term. Derived macro, right? For example. So it was putting it in the not in the generated code instead of in the outside it to decide how to generate the code. So it was basically assuming features that I have in the using crates. And of course that doesn't work. So I had to put it in my MD. So there are things like that that are always like there are these tiny paper cuts that you have to deal with. So do you have any have you set up any skills or things like that for dealing with
Yeah, let me take this moment to pitch a project I'm working on,
that?
which is called Symposium, together with Jack Huey and a few other people. And Symposium is um, uh, my basically my attempt to build agentic-oriented tooling for Rust. So what it does is actually I'm working on a big new PR. I'm just going to talk as if this PR has landed. It's not exactly what it does today, but it's what it will hopefully do soon in a few days. It lets you package up extensions into crates, um, and then install them. And those extensions can be skills, they can be hooks, which let you like interject into the workflow. They could be MCP servers, they could be CLI tools, whatever. And then it installs those automatically for you on the basis of what your dependencies are in your current project, and also like global settings. So you might say, I always want these available. So instead of having that global Cloud MD file, like you could package that up in a crate, publish it, and then others could install it and just have it available, right? It can also go from paths and GitHub repos, but I think
Right.
I like the idea, and I'm trying to push us towards leveraging, existing registries. I also want to add support for Python and Node, for example. In any case, what I have some of that, not maybe not quite as much as it sounded like you have. I I I have a best practice skill that I have to sort of upgrade into this new crate format I'm pushing out, but which uh says a few things. The one that I find most important is always use cargo add when adding a new dependency. Never, just pick a version out of the air, which Claude loves to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And always use Rust 2024, not Rust 2021, stuff like that, basically. But what I have lately been doing and working on is a kind of hook slash post code gen skill. So it doesn't quite do this today, but I'll describe it how I want it to work, and hopefully will by next week or something, where sort of at the end of a turn, like after it's finished generating a bunch of code, kind of goes back over and looks for certain yellow flags that I've found over the years, right? Like I do not like underscores in my match statements, for example. I try to make them all exhaustive, or at least maybe not all, but almost all, essentially. The only good reason to use an underscore is when you're really sure that when a new variant is added, you will like almost certainly not need to be in this list, which is usually hard to predict because you don't know what new things you're going to add. So that's why I
Right.
usually do that. Or if I'm generating some code that touches every field in the struct, I prefer to write a pattern and extract the fields into local variables and then operate on the local variables. And the reason for those things is not that I think it's prettier. In fact, I think it's a little more verbose, but the compiler will catch when I add a new field, I probably wanted to do something, right? If I did something with fields A, B, and C and I add D, it's probably a bug if I don't do the same thing to D. So patterns like that I think are really correlated with like bug finding and making those guardrails we talked about earlier more effective
Mhm.
is what I'm looking for. And I'm trying to write it in a kind of hybrid style, right? So right now I have a skill that just tells the agent, look for these kind of things. But I want to change it into a hook that actually scans, kind of like a lint, basically. Uh,
Right.
Scanning for it because I found that's more effective. And why waste tokens on something that I can do faster and more efficiently with the regex?
True. Right.
Uh,
No, I'm looking forward to it now because I definitely need this. Yeah. Um, I have a bunch of things still, like a few things at least. But Alan, feel free to ask any questions you might have. By the way, do you use LLMs especially with Rust or without Rust even?
Me, I mean, I'm still getting into it. I mean, there's some stuff I use it for, but then sometimes there's, like the situation where it's just so much faster just to, to type it out yourself. And sometimes you get, I wouldn't even call it slop now. I feel like, the word slop obviously is super negative, right? But I feel like
Yeah,
things are getting better, with every model, with every update, they're getting better and better, obviously with more context. So you're not necessarily having slop, but you're having things that are not quite what you want. And so that's what I often find doing. And sometimes it's like, should I prompt it, or should I just do it myself? Because at least I know if I do it myself, I'll get what I want. So yeah, there's definitely sometimes where it's like, so for instance, I had to add a feature for a client, I, and this one, there's no defined style, right? So I just said, okay, create this in the UI, and it was, boom, it was like I looked at it, okay, good enough. Minor changes. I felt okay for this one, I'll just copy paste because this is cut paste somewhere else. Certain things. It was about two things, so it was just felt like faster just do it like that. So I think for doing UIs, it's better, especially if you have no like particular interest. There's a project called I forget what it's called now. Oh, Tidewave, where it actually could hook into Figma, and then you could say do this like in the project. So that kind of stuff I think is much more interesting for me. But like the logic, I mean, it depends on how much coding you're going to be doing. So I'm mostly, a spectator listening to see what you guys are saying because I'm a beginner in this trail.
yeah,
So I'm learning from you
fair
guys as you guys.
enough. Yeah.
I
Um,
think I think there's two things I just wanted to add. Like one, you know, there's no shame in writing by hand.
yeah.
That seems obvious, but it's sort of a lesson I had to learn. It was like,
At
I
some
feel
point it will be
shamed.
a stigma, right? At some
I
point
feel
you
shamed. Yeah. Go ahead.
No,
uh,
I was just saying at some point it will be, right? It will be a stigma if this continues, like if AI is doing most of the coding, people
I
who
think
write
it
better.
depends. Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess I think that working entirely by hand is going to be, I don't know if I call it a shame. I would call
Mhm.
it that, but it's definitely going to be slower. Um, what I mean more is like there does come a point where you're, like I said, you're pushing the model and it just doesn't get it, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, let me just show you. This is what I want. And I find I do a lot of that actually, and it's sometimes I'll just do the first third, right? It's not necessarily binary. A lot of times it's like, let me do this one example and then you can do the rest, stuff like
right.
that. Because that can be helpful. There was one other thing, which is I feel like one side effect, and I don't know, I mean, I don't know exactly what has led to this outcome, but there's a lot of stress and anxiety about like being behind the curve and stuff like that. And I guess it kind of reminds me of like, well, anyway, that's a weird metaphor. I'll just say, I think everyone, I won't say my weird metaphor. Instead, I'll just say the reality, which is I think everyone's all over the place when I talk to people. Like some folks are not using it at all. Some are setting up autonomous agents, but it's actually a lot easier to catch up than you think because it's really not that complicated at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
the good thing about
I
being
think it's
behind
getting
the
easier.
curve, I just
Yeah,
want to say the good thing about being behind the curve, quote unquote curve, is that you get all the benefits, right? So while everybody was
right.
trying these different ideas and things, I think it's probably just guessing, right? On the whole, things are going to fail more than succeed. So
Yep.
you're going to like have success over and over again. You're going to miss all the other stuff. But the
Yeah,
other
you
thing
get
too
that
that
late mover advantage. You just get to
the other
learn
thing
from
too,
the lessons.
the other
Um,
thing
yeah,
very important too is that like I still get PRs that are done by AI. I don't understand them. I have to still ask the guy, what is this? And I still get the answer of that's what the AI generated for me, so that's what I'm going to give you. It's like, no, dude, this is not how
yeah,
this works. Like, that is the definition of slop when you just like have the spaghetti code that's been AI together, right? So
yeah,
like using
definitely.
the word vibe, I guess using the word vibing is now okay to use because it was kind of a little bit of like a slander before, right? Like you see people say I vibe this, it's like, ooh, that's not going to be good. But now it's like I vibe this thing, and it's like seems to be more neutral nowadays. No, is that how you guys
I
feel?
think it went from positive to negative to neutral. I just use it like a statement of fact. Like vibe means, yeah, I wrote it, and I think it's perfectly fine if you don't really care about it.
Mhm.
Like if all you're looking for is to get a result, and especially like something you don't expect to use for a very long time, like that data analysis I was talking about. That was like, I want to analyze this data. I want a program to do it. I'm not going to run this a week from now. I don't care. I just want the output. Like, why not vibe code it? It seems fine.
Right.
So it sounds like we're exchanging the word prototype with vibe now in that instance. Because I mean that's kind of what a prototype is, right? It's like I got it good enough to where I can use it. Except
Yeah,
for
I
now it's
mean,
like a mindless prototype to a certain extent, right? Or like a not very,
in this case, it
it's a
wasn't really a
hands-off one.
prototype because it's not something I'm gonna redo later. It's just a
Well,
thing.
how many
It's a
times have
script.
you, I mean, for me, every time I prototype something, give it to a client, they want that thing in production. Even though I tell them that it's a prototype, no, they're like, no, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. Just throw it in there. Or they put it in there themselves, which is even worse.
Yeah, actually it can be worse. Like I once worked with automotive, and in automotive that was also the case that they would ask you like, "Oh, this prototype, this works. Like, why don't we put it in the car?" And you're telling them, "No, no, no, you can't do that. It's prototype. No, it works. So what's the problem?" So yeah.
So one challenge, I have to go on the hour, so it means we've got about 10 minutes or so. I
Okay,
don't
okay.
know whether you've got other
I'll
things you really want to get to, but
Yeah, I'll try to get to. I think one of the things that came to me now is that we have been talking about like you trying to do something and LLM not getting it or not doing a good job, and then you have to iterate it and stuff. Is there a lot of instances have you seen of the complete opposite, which I have been seeing more and more happening because I come up with some architecture and I want these changes and I tell the LLM and it points out something that I didn't even think about and that's very important and it just makes the whole thing fall apart. So have in your experience has it happened a lot?
yes, in big and small ways. Sometimes it does choices I wouldn't have done, but they're better than what I had in mind. And other times, um, I, it falls out from that process, like the process of writing that design document and iterating on it, which I would rarely have done before because it's so tedious. Uh, uh, uncovers flaws that I would have found them eventually, usually, but I would have, later in the process after I'd committed more code and done more work instead of within the first hour. Definitely that happens all the time. Um,
Okay, cool. Um, The next thing is we can actually go straight to the controversial parts. So,
Joy.
yeah, as we already mentioned, there's like PR for getting some sort of policy. There's like in all the projects that I know, open source projects, there is at least a talk about it, or there's already a policy in place. Um, my like I am my main concern with those is that mainly about enforcement. So unless you just say like, okay, we don't allow it, even then it's like, how do you enforce it, right? Like any of the policies that you come up with, how can you really enforce it in a meaningful way, especially as the models get better and better and it gets really hard to distinguish from like if it's human generated or not. So thoughts on that, and especially in terms of Rust. You said you stayed away from that PR and you stayed away from the discussion, but I think eventually it will affect you as well, right? Like it will affect all of us. So
Yeah, I mean, I didn't entirely stay away. I was
yeah,
active. I just kind of, I don't know what the right word is, got tired of it. But 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 I think it's really complicated. I actually think the second mover advantage frame that we were talking earlier has has over time as I've been thinking about it, I think it actually makes some sense. Like I think for larger projects like Rust and whatever, um, there's some advantage to let's not just jump on the hype train right away. Let's wait and see how things play out and adopt best practice once best practice is kind of known, right? So I'm open to that. What I think is that more and more this is going to be the direction developers are going. And so I think for open source, not for Rust, not for any one project, just for us as a community, we do need to engage with uh, how are we going to integrate this kind of development into our practices and what does it mean? And I think Alan, your example of vibe coded PRs, like that's definitely a negative thing. That's what we don't want. Um, I'm not entirely sure what we do want, right, for the workflow. And what what I I guess like in the very short term, what I think people ought to do is, yeah, just close the damn PR. It's not the end of the world to say, well, thanks for your contribution, but I'm going to close this PR right now. I don't think it's in a state I can accept, and move on with your life. It doesn't have to be a judgment on the use of LLMs or not. Like I don't think that's if the same if anybody before LLMs, people opened gigantic PRs that they didn't and tinkered with code they didn't really understand, and I closed them, right? And I don't see this as being terribly different. If they weren't, I usually, I guess over time, I've kind of come to the opinion that I'm not like super keen on the unsolicited PR workflow anyway. It seems okay for like small fixes and drive-by changes, but for the kind of work I like to do, which tends to be more large development, I really prefer to uh kind of find a contributor beforehand and like making we're going to have a weekly meeting. We're going to check in on this. We're going to talk about the design because I'm really trying to invest in them as the future maintainer of that thing. And I don't know. So I'm more interested in like GSOC style stuff or outreachy or working with students or finding more structured onboarding programs. I think that's something Rust open source needs, and we're not that good at. But and I think it would help here too, because then I don't care if they're using an LLM or not. Like I'm talking to them, I know what they understand and don't. Right. Um, anyway, I got distracted. Where was I going with this? Oh, right, the policy. So I haven't read the latest draft. I think that Jin and so just speaking very specifically about that PR, I think a lot of the people who've been involved in it have done amazing work. Jin has done a great job trying to bridge, people like me who are pretty enthusiastic and people who are really against the use of LLMs, even if they are advantageous due to concerns about their impact on society and so forth, climate, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a really hard job. So I'm not judging in any case for the outcome, right? And I appreciate the work people have put in. What I like about the policy as I saw it is that it does leave room for um, like people sort of one-on-one usage of LLMs. So like if I'm working with an experienced contributor and they know I'm using an LLM, the PR has room for like you can land those changes and that's good. And I think I would have preferred a policy that was like simpler and focused really on that as, hey, we're not ready to just have wide open, but that doesn't mean you can't use an LLM. It means this is the route to do so. Come and work with us through this experimental programs. Um, but really that's in some sense a matter of emphasis. I think in the broad strokes, the policy hits the right notes. Uh, it's also specific to the compiler. It's worth pointing out there are a lot of repos in Rustling and they have different policies. So like Rust Analyzer has a policy I'm quite fond of, which basically says like, yeah, you can use an LLM, but you still got to have good code. And, you know, if you haven't reviewed it, why should we? We're going to close it if we don't think it looks like you did. Uh, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds fine. Sounds very reasonable to me. I think it really depends also just on how much like some repositories get a lot of weird vibe coded in a negative sense PRs and some repos don't for whatever reason, right?
One aspect of this whole, like, especially folks who are very much against use of LLM at all, that I sort of agree with is the argument of the hype, which, as we know, like there's a lot of like way too much hype on in the AI, and people are using it for all kinds of things, and which creates the hype, which helps put the bubble up, and like the bubble has to burst at some point, right? In a way or one way or another, right? Because if something is hyped, at some point the market, catches up with you. The economy doesn't let you go forever. So my thinking is that it's like there has to be some like like everything that bursts, like for example, dot com bubble, it burst, but there was like we still had websites, right? Like people were still making websites and they were still doing a lot of web stuff, cool web stuff still. So it's just like there was a core that was left. That was the useful part of it. But I think in this specific case, what could happen that I feel is dangerous. I don't know what you think about it, but I think it's like, for example, Claude or OpenAI's model, they will become a lot more expensive, right? Like because they have to get the money back. So do you think we will be still, able to use those models, or if not, then would we be able to move to like these local models? Would they be able to catch up? I don't know what's your thinking about that.
I mean, I agree with your premise that there's obviously a lot of hype here,
Mm.
and that doesn't mean that there's nothing there. And that
Right.
I make that same analogy, having lived through that era. At this point, the idea of making a web product without a website is like, what, why? Right? It's exactly what they said was going to happen, just took longer. But I'm really excited about local models. I'm actually really excited for prices to go up, oddly enough, because I think that these artificially inflated prices or deflated have kind of encouraged a sort of sloppy consumption and not forced any discipline onto us as an industry in how we use LLMs, right? And so I'd rather see more accurate pricing. I think that uh, where people are going to go is a much more hybrid usage where you use deterministic traditional computation when it makes sense and you sort of use LLMs uh, where it makes sense, right? And I think that's not, I'm, some of that is the agent that's writing your code, and some of that is the code itself. Like I think we're going to also see there's a lot of problems that were really hard to write or algorithm to solve, but you could solve it with a language model. Um, so we're going to see some of that. Uh, I I'm really excited about it, and yet I have not, I admit, done a whole lot of experimentation with those local models. I keep seeing posts where people say they're getting better and better. I also see posts where people are like, yeah, better, but not yet there. Um, and part of the reason I haven't, I have to also admit, is because I have free access to Claude Code, or, within Amazon, so like my incentive is
Right.
low. So it's on my mind to do. I want to do more of it. I think we're going to see more of it, but it's obviously going to take some work. Even Claude Code, if you dig in, right? I mean, part of what they talk about is the way that it's structured is that it kind of dynamically chooses between lower level models for simpler tasks and higher level
Yeah.
models. So actually, we're coming at the end of when I have to go, but I'll just say like the thing that I'm really excited about that I haven't seen a lot of motion in and why I'm excited about ACP is I want to see us getting away from the like big, everything is packaged into one big vertical. Like Claude Code is kind of all the things, right? It's a model, it's a harness, it's picking, it's doing memories, it's loading in skills, it's got swarms. That's cool, but there's so many independent pieces. They've chosen one combination. I really think we advance fastest when everyone can come in and tinker and build and layer and compose to get a new result, right? Especially in a space like this that's so new and so fast moving. So what I find really frustrating is all the extension mechanisms that agents offer now tend to be these like one-way extensions. Like you can plug in a skill or an MCP server. But the thing is, an agent plus a skill, like it's what I want is something more like, to use a Rust analogy, more like iterator, right? You have an iterator, you use dot filter, you have another iterator. Now you can use dot filter again and again, right? To compose really complicated computations. So I want a model where you start with like a really minimal agent, just like just knows how to take prompts and go and then you can layer on like extensions, and what you get out is another agent, right? Which can then be extended so that, oh, I add on skills and then I add on the ability to do swarms or whatever. And I've built prototype this in ACP, which is this protocol where basically you have that Zed uses to talk to agents. And so you can kind of use like, think of it like middleware. Basically, it's like the client is you typing at your editor, sending JSON RPC messages to the agent. And so then you can stick stuff in between, right? And it's a much more powerful extension mechanism. But there's still a lot of gaps and work to do to make that really work. But I would like to see that. And then what I'd like to see is, hey, everybody does one thing really well, right? We have like one really powerful model for the really hard, thinky problems, some really efficient coding models targeted at specific problems. And then we have different people writing orchestration agents that take those, each of those are agents, but then they write an orchestration agent that combines them into another agent that chooses how to use them. And we tinker with those algorithms. I think there's so much room. And right now we're sort of locked into a single track and we're missing a lot of potential. One example I thought was really cool. I talked to a professor who's been fine-tuning a local model on Rust code specifically to do C to Rust translation. And what he found was like the model does not compete with Opus, right? If you just say translate this code base, it will not do a good job. But if you say translate this function or give it some parameters, it does as good or better. And so what he does is use Opus to make a plan and then deploy this model for the heavy lifting, right? And so that's sort of a hybrid, right? Now you're using Opus, yeah, but only for like the first 10%. And then the remaining 90% of your token usage is all local models actually running on a GPU, zero cost,
Ah,
modulo the
right.
cost of the GPU. But anyway, so
Cool.
I think
Yeah.
that's the kind of model we're going to see more of.
Yeah, there are companies nowadays, like a lot of them that have popped up that are exactly based on this, like making this work.
Yeah.
And they have actual products. I think they work. I don't know. I've never used them.
I've never used them either. Like I said, I don't have a lot of incentive right now,
yeah.
but I would like to do more of it.
Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. So I think you need to go. So we need to sort
Sadly,
of
yes.
sorry. Yeah. So like two things I would ask. Did you get to try this Fable model? I guess you don't try directly, so you never did. But
I never did,
yeah, okay.
but I've
Um,
heard people.
yeah,
I
I
thought
used it. I
you
used it.
used it. Okay.
Yeah. So no, I used it for two very difficult things. At least in my mind, they were very difficult, and I thought it will take hours or days. At least on one of them, which was to create a new app from beginning, like a replicating a proprietary app with all its features and stuff. And it did it in 30 minutes with very little prompting. Did a really good job, and it worked. All the essentials worked completely from the very beginning, even though it was a very UI thing, which usually it fails at. So very impressed. But it was taken away, so I don't know anymore. Secondly, I wanted to just ask in the end, like I think we end like that, Alan, if you correct me if I'm wrong, but we ask the guest like if you want to say something, you have a message or just general.
Yeah, how to get in contact, etc. This kind of stuff.
Hmm,
Yeah, I mean, I guess my closing message would be I want people to try out Symposium or come tell me what they like or don't like or what they would like to see. Part of the pitch, which I didn't push as hard on, I guess, is that I would like to see all crate authors, anyone authoring a Rust crate, getting involved in making that Rust crate, work really well with agentic development. I think it's going to be to your advantage. And that's what Symposium is supposed to help you do by letting you package up skills and so on. So it's symposium.dev, uh, and we have a Zulip as well, symposium-dev.zulipchat.com,
nice.
something like that. Uh, so I'd love to hear from folks who are listening who are interested or curious to try it out. And that's all I got.
Cool.
Be excellent to each other, I guess. All right. Thank you guys. This is fun. Good chat.
Yeah.